They say the people who give you life should be the ones who help you build it. But in my world, my father was only interested in tearing down everything I tried to create. My name is Harper. For as long as I can remember, my existence was overshadowed by a brilliant, beautiful, and completely toxic family dynamic. My father, Arthur, was a titan in the corporate world, a man who measured a person's worth solely by the luxury cars they drove, the elite universities they attended, and the amount of power they held over others. Then there was my younger sister, Chloe. She was the golden child, a perfect reflection of my father's superficial ideals. She went to the right schools, wore the right labels, and constantly craved his spotlight. I, on the other hand, was always the outsider. I didn't want his corporate titles. I wanted something real, something built on honor and sacrifice. So, the day I turned 18, I did the unthinkable in my family. I signed my name on a dotted line and joined the United States military. I will never forget the look of sheer disgust on my father's face when I told him. He didn't see an honorable choice. He saw a failure. To him, enlisting meant I didn't have the brains or the class to survive in his high society corporate kingdom. From that moment on, whenever I returned home, I was treated like an uninvited ghost. If I tried to share stories of my deployments or the challenges I overcame, my father would actively roll his eyes or cut me off entirely to praise Chloe's latest country club achievement. I was completely invisible, forced to swallow my pride, wear my uniform in silence, and accept that my own father viewed me as nothing more than a mindless, low-level soldier. But everything shattered when my grandfather passed away. Grandfather was a deeply principled man, and he was the only one who truly recognized my dedication. When his will was read, it completely destabilized our family structure. He had bypassed my father entirely, leaving his massive $12 million estate and inheritance directly to me. But what I didn't know that day was how quickly greed could transform your own blood into dangerous enemies. The moment the announcement was made, my father's icy indifference turned into an aggressive, calculated campaign of hatred. He couldn't accept that the daughter he openly despised was now holding the keys to the family legacy. He immediately demanded that I hand over the rights to the money, claiming I was far too simple-minded to handle it. When I looked him in the eye and quietly refused, his expression turned malicious. He promised he would use every resource he had to completely ruin me, which is exactly how I found myself standing inside a cold, imposing federal courtroom on a rainy Tuesday morning. I walked into that room completely alone, dressed in a simple, dark civilian suit. Across the aisle sat my father and Chloe, looking absolutely untouchable, flanked by one of the most expensive corporate legal teams in the country. As the judge entered, my father leaned over to his lead attorney, pointing a dismissive finger toward my table. With a cruel, arrogant smirk, he whispered loudly enough to echo through the quiet room. "Don't worry about her. My daughter is just a grunt. She has no power in a place like this." He genuinely believed he was about to steal my grandfather's legacy and break me into pieces. He had no idea that his overwhelming arrogance was about to walk him straight into his own downfall. The legal proceedings began, and it quickly became clear that my father's plan wasn't just to contest a will. It was to completely destroy my character. His high-priced corporate attorney stood before the judge, radiating a practiced, intimidating confidence. With a booming voice, he began to paint a picture of me that was utterly unrecognizable and deeply heartbreaking. They submitted a mountain of paperwork into evidence, fabricated psychological evaluations, distorted stories from my childhood, and highly out-of-context military records. They argued that my years of service had left me mentally unstable, erratic, and emotionally incapable of managing a multi-million-dollar estate. They claimed I was a deeply manipulative, bitter daughter who had used underhanded tactics to brainwash a frail, dying old man in his final days. Every single lie felt like a physical blow, leaving me feeling completely shattered. I sat alone at my table, watching my own father nod along with a look of theatrical sorrow, pretending to be a heartbroken parent who is just trying to protect his unwell child from her own incompetence. I looked over at Chloe, She was casually buffing her nails, totally unbothered by the fact that my reputation was being publicly executed for a piece of paper. The sheer depth of the betrayal was suffocating. These were the people who were supposed to protect me, yet they were standing in a federal court, utterly crushing my soul, just to line their own pockets with $12 million. For a fleeting moment, the old feelings of worthlessness tried to take over. My heart was racing, and I felt completely broken, trapped in a room full of powerful wolves. But then, my father took the witness stand to testify against me. He looked directly at the judge, his voice dripping with a flawless, deceptive warmth. "Your Honor," he said, sighing dramatically, "it breaks my heart, but my daughter Harper is simply a grunt. She has spent her entire adult life in the lowest ranks of the military, trained only to take basic, mindless orders. She completely lacks the intellectual depth, the education, and the stability to manage an empire. This inheritance belongs in the hands of those who actually understand the law and business." Hearing those words echo through the courtroom, microphone did something profound to me. The heavy heartbreak and the pain suddenly burned away, replaced by a cold, sharp, and unwavering strength. I looked down at my hands, remembering the grueling years of intense study, the sleepless nights, and the massive, high-stakes responsibilities I had quietly carried on my shoulders far away from his toxic world. I had allowed my family to treat me like a shadow for my entire life because I loved them. But looking at them now, using perjury, bribery, and malice to rob me, I realized they didn't deserve my love, and they definitely didn't deserve my silence anymore, until everything changed in a single fraction of a second. The judge looked over at my empty table, his expression incredibly grave. "Miss Harper," the judge stated firmly, "your father's counsel has raised devastating questions regarding your competence and standing. Do you have any legal representation present, or any evidence to counter these heavy claims?" I stood up slowly, smoothing down my blazer, my heart beating in a perfectly calm, steady rhythm. The entire courtroom fell dead silent. My father leaned back in the witness box, crossing his arms with a smug smile, fully expecting me to burst into tears or beg for a settlement. Chloe didn't even bother to look up. They honestly believed the trap had closed on a helpless soldier. I looked the judge directly in the eye, my voice ringing out with absolute, undeniable authority. "Yes, Your Honor, I do have representation. I will be representing myself, and I would like to formally submit my official credentials to this court." I opened my briefcase, pulled out a sealed, certified federal folder, and walked it directly forward to the bailiff. "For the record," I announced, my voice slicing through the heavy room like a razor blade, "I am not a civilian seeking legal counsel. I am a fully licensed active-duty attorney specializing in federal prosecution, currently serving within the higher ranks of the Judge Advocate General's Corps. I am a JAG officer." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. I turned around just in time to watch the color completely drain from my father's face. His crossed arms dropped instantly to his sides. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The high-powered corporate lawyer he had hired froze mid, his eyes widening in absolute panic as he stared at the official military seals on the documents being handed to the judge. Chloe's jaw dropped, her smug expression vanishing into an expression of pure terror. The judge thoroughly reviewed the paperwork, a look of profound respect crossing his face. "The record will reflect," the judge announced loudly, "that the defendant is a highly distinguished military legal expert. These credentials are fully valid. For years, I had kept my specific career advancements and my transition into the JAG Corps completely private from my family. They never asked about my life, so I never told them. In their extreme arrogance, they assumed that because I was in the military, I was just a low-level foot soldier doing manual labor. They had no idea that while they were busy spending money, I was prosecuting complex federal cases and running circles around lawyers twice their attorney's age. The tables hadn't just turned. I took total control of the courtroom, with the razor-sharp precision of a trained federal prosecutor. I systematically ran the courtroom and dismantled their entire case, piece by piece. I presented ironclad digital evidence proving that the psychological evaluations they submitted were completely fraudulent, tracing the digital footprint and bank records back to a corrupt doctor my father had personally wired $50,000 to just 3 weeks prior. I then submitted financial records exposing my father's hidden debts, proving that his own corporate empire was on the brink of total bankruptcy, which was the real desperate reason they needed my grandfather's millions. By the time I finished presenting my closing arguments, my father's expensive lawyer looked like a ghost. He knew they were entirely exposed. The judge looked down at my father with absolute, burning disgust. Not only was the case dismissed with prejudice, ensuring they could never touch a single cent of the inheritance, but the judge also ordered an immediate federal investigation into my father for perjury, bribery, and document forgery. As the court adjourned, I calmly packed my files into my briefcase. My father stumbled toward my table, his hands visibly shaking, his voice completely stripped of its usual arrogance. "Harper, please," he stammered, looking at me with actual terror in his eyes. "We are a family. We can fix this outside of court. Please don't do this." I snapped my briefcase shut, looked him dead in the eyes, and felt nothing but a deep, beautiful, and lasting peace. "You were right about one thing, Dad," I said quietly. "A grunt knows exactly how to fight in the mud. But you forgot that a JAG officer knows exactly how to rule the courtroom." I walked out of that federal courthouse into the warm afternoon sun, leaving them behind to face the wreckage of their own greed. I learned a vital lesson through that pain. Your worth is never defined by the people who fail to appreciate you, even if they share your blood. Real strength doesn't require shouting, status, or stepping on others. It is about knowing exactly who you are, standing your ground with dignity, and trusting that the truth will always have the final, loudest word.